I stood in the corner of the banquet hall watching my younger brother Trevor celebrate his engagement to Vanessa, a woman I'd never met before tonight. She was beautiful, confident, and currently laughing with her friends as they pointed at me and whispered. I heard snippets of their conversation. That's Trevor's sister, the unemployed one, and I heard she dropped out of college and lives in a tiny apartment, and poor Trevor. Having such a loser in the family, they didn't know I could hear them. They didn't know a lot of things, but they were about to find out. Because on Monday morning, when Vanessa and her 3 best friends showed up to work at Hartley Digital Solutions, they were going to discover that the unemployed loser they'd been mocking all night was actually their boss, the owner of the company, the person who signed their paychecks, and I was going to enjoy every second of watching their faces when they realized what they'd done. Before we get into this story, and trust me, you're going to want to hear every detail of what happened next, I need you to do something for me. Hit that like button right now, subscribe to this channel, and drop a comment telling me which city you're watching from. Your support helps me bring you more incredible stories like this one. Now let's go back to the beginning, because to understand how sweet this revenge was, you need to know the whole story. My name is Sophia Hartley, and I'm 31 years old. I grew up in a upper-middle-class family in Denver, Colorado. My father, Richard Hartley, was a successful software engineer who worked for various tech companies throughout my childhood. My mother, Linda, was a stay-at-home mom who managed the household and took care of me and my younger brother, Trevor. On the surface, we looked like the perfect American family: nice house in the suburbs, 2 cars, family vacations every summer. But beneath that surface, there were some serious issues that would shape my entire life. My parents had very traditional ideas about gender and success. My father believed that men should be the breadwinners and leaders, while women should focus on getting married and raising families. He never said it directly when I was young, but his attitudes were clear in how he treated Trevor versus how he treated me. When Trevor showed interest in computers and technology, our father spent hours teaching him to code, buying him the latest equipment, praising his every accomplishment. When I showed the same interest, I was told it was nice that I had hobbies, but I shouldn't neglect more important things like my appearance and social skills. My mother reinforced these messages, constantly reminding me that my real value would come from landing a good husband and being a good wife and mother. I was a bright kid, always at the top of my class, naturally good at math and science. In high school, I took every advanced placement course I could, particularly excelling in computer science and programming. My teachers encouraged me to pursue technology as a career. I dreamed of going to a top university and becoming a software engineer like my father. But when it came time to apply to colleges, my parents had other plans. They wanted me to go to a local state school and major in something appropriate for a young woman like communications or education. They said they'd pay for my college if I agreed to their terms. If I wanted to study computer science at a more expensive school, I'd be on my own financially. Trevor, who was 4 years younger than me, was already being groomed for success. My parents talked constantly about sending him to the best schools, about his bright future in technology, about how proud they were of his potential. The double standard was so obvious it hurt. But I was 18 and stubborn and determined to prove I could succeed on my own terms. I applied to University of California, Berkeley's computer science program and got accepted. I told my parents I was going with or without their support. They were furious, said I was being selfish and ungrateful, that I was throwing away my future for some feminist fantasy about being a career woman. I went anyway. I worked 3 part-time jobs while taking a full course load, living in a tiny shared apartment with 4 other students, eating ramen and sleeping 4 hours a night. It was brutal. I had no safety net, no support system, no one to call when things got hard. My parents had completely cut me off, not just financially, but emotionally. They didn't call, didn't visit, acted like I'd betrayed them by choosing my own path. Trevor would sometimes text me in secret, telling me what was happening at home, how our parents talked about me like I was this cautionary tale of what happens when daughters don't listen. I made it through my first year, barely, by sheer determination. But halfway through my sophomore year, I got really sick. What started as a bad cold turned into pneumonia. I ended up in the hospital for a week, missing classes and work, racking up medical bills I couldn't afford. I tried to push through, tried to catch up, but I'd fallen too far behind. I failed 2 classes that semester and lost one of my jobs because I'd been absent so much. My grades dropped. My savings were wiped out by medical bills. and I was looking at losing my housing because I couldn't make rent. I had a choice. I could drop out temporarily, work full-time to get back on my feet financially, and then try to return to school. Or I could keep struggling and probably fail out completely. I chose to take a leave of absence, telling myself it would just be for a semester or two, that I'd go back and finish my degree as soon as I was stable. I moved back to Colorado, not to live with my parents because that wasn't an option, but to a small apartment in Denver where the cost of living was lower than Berkeley. My parents, of course, saw this as proof they'd been right all along. My father actually said I told you so when I called to let them know I was back in town. They didn't offer to help, didn't ask if I needed anything, just smugly accepted that I'd failed at my big dream and would now hopefully settle down and do what they'd wanted all along. Trevor was 16 by this point, still the golden child, being groomed for his future success. My parents would invite him to family dinners and gatherings, but make it clear I wasn't welcome unless I was ready to apologize for my mistakes and commit to a more traditional path. I was bitter. I was angry. I was heartbroken. But I was also determined. I got a job doing tech support at a small digital marketing company, Apex Solutions. It wasn't glamorous work, just answering phones and helping customers with basic technical issues. But I was good at it. Really good. I could troubleshoot problems quickly, explain technical concepts in ways regular people could understand, and I had the patience to deal with frustrated customers. Within 6 months, I'd been promoted to senior tech support. Within a year, I was training new employees and helping develop better support systems. The owner of Apex Solutions was a man named George Chen, a first-generation immigrant who'd built the company from nothing. He noticed my work ethic and my skills, and he started giving me more responsibilities. He let me shadow the developers, learn about the business side of digital marketing, attend client meetings. George became a mentor to me in a way my own father had never been. He saw my potential and nurtured it, asking me about my dreams and my goals instead of telling me what I should want. I told George about dropping out of Berkeley, about my dream of working in tech, about my family situation. He listened without judgment and then made me an offer. He said he'd pay for me to finish my degree part-time at University of Colorado, Denver if I committed to working at Apex Solutions while I studied. He said he needed smart, driven people on his team, and he was willing to invest in me. I almost cried. This stranger believed in me more than my own parents ever had. So that's what I did. For the next 4 years, I worked full-time at Apex Solutions during the day and took classes at night and on weekends. It was exhausting, but it was also fulfilling. I was learning constantly, both in the classroom and on the job. I got my bachelor's degree in computer science when I was 26. Walking across that stage with George and his family in the audience because my own family couldn't be bothered to come. My mother had said something about how it was nice I'd finally finished school, but it was a shame I was so old now and had wasted my best years on a career instead of finding a husband. By the time I graduated, I was basically running the technical side of Apex Solutions. I'd developed new software solutions for clients, streamlined our processes, and helped grow the company significantly. George made me Chief Technology Officer when I was 27, which came with a substantial raise and profit sharing. For the first time in my life, I had real financial security. I was making 6 figures, had savings, could afford a nice apartment, and a reliable car. I'd done it without my parents' help, without any safety net, entirely on my own merit and determination. But George was getting older and his health was declining. He'd built Apex Solutions over 30 years and had poured his life into it, but he had no children and no succession plan. One day he called me into his office and told me he'd been diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The doctors gave him 6 months, maybe a year. He said he'd been thinking about what would happen to the company after he was gone, and he wanted to make me an offer. He wanted to sell Apex Solutions to me. I was stunned. The company was worth millions. I had savings, but nothing close to what I'd need to buy a company outright. George smiled and said he'd thought of that. He'd structure it so I could buy the company over time, paying him initially and then his estate after he passed, using the company's profits. The terms were incredibly generous, clearly designed to make it possible for me to afford it. He said I'd earned it, that I'd helped build the company into what it was, and he trusted me to take it into the future. I said yes. We spent the next 6 months working with lawyers to structure the sale and transfer ownership. George taught me everything he could about running the business side, introducing me to key clients and partners, making sure I understood every aspect of the company. He died 8 months after his diagnosis, surrounded by his family, having secured the future of his life's work. I spoke at his funeral, telling everyone how he'd changed my life, how he'd been more of a father to me than my own father. My parents weren't there. I hadn't even told them George existed. After George died, I rebranded the company. Apex Solutions became Hartley Digital Solutions, bearing my name as a daily reminder of what I'd accomplished on my own. I was 29 years old and I owned a multi-million-dollar digital marketing and software development company with 45 employees and major corporate clients across the western United States. I'd made it. I'd achieved the success I dreamed of as a teenager, despite every obstacle my family had put in my way. But here's the thing about success that nobody tells you: it doesn't automatically heal your family relationships. My parents still didn't know the full extent of what I'd accomplished. They knew I worked in tech, knew I had some kind of job at a marketing company, but I'd never told them I owned it. Why would I? They'd never asked about my work with genuine interests, never congratulated me on my achievements, never acknowledged that maybe they'd been wrong about me. In their minds, I was still the daughter who'd dropped out of college and disappointed them. Trevor knew a bit more because we'd reconnected somewhat over the years, texting occasionally, meeting for coffee when we could, but even he didn't know I owned the company. I'd kept it private, not out of shame, but because I'd learned that my family's opinion didn't define me anymore. Trevor had followed the path my parents had laid out for him. He'd gone to a good state school, studied business, graduated with decent grades, but nothing spectacular. My parents had supported him fully, paid for everything, been at every milestone. He'd gotten a job at a mid-level management position at a logistics company and was doing fine, living a comfortable middle-class life. My parents talked about him like he was wildly successful, like he'd achieved something remarkable, even though he was following a completely conventional path with their full support every step of the way. The contrast with how they'd treated my actual remarkable achievements was infuriating, but I'd learned to let it go. I had my own life, my own success, and I didn't need their validation anymore. Then Trevor called me 6 months ago, excited and nervous. He'd met someone, a woman named Vanessa Porter, who worked in marketing at a digital solutions company. They'd been dating for 4 months and he was head over heels, planning to propose soon. He wanted me to meet her, said it was important to him that his big sister approved of the woman he was going to marry. I was touched and a little surprised. Trevor and I had a cordial relationship, but we weren't particularly close, separated by age and by the different ways our parents had treated us. But I agreed to meet Vanessa for coffee. The meeting was ... fine. Vanessa was polished and attractive, well-dressed and articulate. She worked in client relations at some digital marketing company she didn't name, handling communications between the company and its corporate clients. She talked a lot about her job, about how demanding it was, about how important her role was to the company's success. She asked what I did, and I said I worked in tech. She didn't ask for details, and I didn't offer them. She talked about Trevor like he was her prize, how lucky she was to have found such a successful, stable guy with such a good family background. I noticed she emphasized his family background, asking pointed questions about our parents, their careers, their social standing. It felt transactional somehow, like she was evaluating his worth based on his family connections rather than who he actually was as a person. But Trevor was happy, and I wanted him to be happy. So I told him I thought Vanessa seemed nice and that I was glad he'd found someone. He asked if I'd come to the engagement party they were planning. My parents would be there, he warned me, and it might be awkward given our history, but it would mean a lot to him if I came. I thought about it for a long time. I hadn't seen my parents in person in over 3 years. We'd been in the same city all that time, but had managed to avoid each other completely. The idea of facing them filled me with anxiety and old hurt. But Trevor was my brother, and despite everything, I wanted to support him. So I said yes. The engagement party was tonight, held at an upscale banquet hall my parents had rented. I'd agonized over what to wear, finally settling on a simple black dress, elegant but not flashy. I didn't want to give my parents any ammunition to criticize me. I arrived right on time, 7 p.m., and the hall was already full of people. Trevor had apparently invited everyone he knew, plus all of Vanessa's friends and family, plus extended family members I hadn't seen since I was a teenager. I found Trevor near the entrance and hugged him, genuinely happy for him despite my reservations about Vanessa. He introduced me to Vanessa's parents, Michael and Patricia Porter, who were polite but cool. Then Vanessa appeared with 3 other women, all around her age. all dressed like they were attending a fashion show rather than an engagement party. "These are my best friends," Vanessa announced, gesturing to the women. "Madison, Brianna, and Chelsea. We all work together at the best digital marketing company in Denver. We're basically running the place." The women laughed like this was hilarious. I smiled and introduced myself as Trevor's sister. Madison, a tall blonde, looked me up and down with barely concealed judgment. "Oh, you're the sister Trevor mentioned. The one who's between jobs right now." I blinked, confused. "I'm not between jobs. I work in tech." Brianna, a redhead with sharp features, jumped in. "Right? Tech support or something. That must be so fulfilling, helping people reset their passwords all day." They all laughed again. Chelsea, the brunette of the group, added, "Don't feel bad. Not everyone is cut out for a real career. At least you're trying." I felt my face heat up, but I kept my voice calm. "Actually, I do software development and business strategy." Vanessa patted my arm condescendingly. "That's nice that you're learning new skills. It's never too late to go back to school or get training. Trevor mentioned you dropped out of college. Such a shame. But you can always get a certificate in something practical." Before I could respond, my parents appeared. My mother, Linda, looked exactly the same. Her hair perfectly styled, wearing an expensive dress, and her judgmental expression. My father, Richard, had aged more gray at the temples, but still had that air of disappointed authority. "Sophia," my mother said, her tone making my name sound like a sigh. "You came, how, unexpected." My father nodded at me briefly, then turned his attention to Vanessa and her friends, complimenting them on their dresses and asking about their careers with genuine interest he'd never shown in mine. The next hour was torture. I stood awkwardly on the sidelines while my parents fawned over Vanessa and her friends, talking about Trevor's wonderful future with such an accomplished woman. Vanessa's friends stayed in a tight group, occasionally glancing at me and whispering, clearly still mocking the unemployed dropout sister. I heard Madison telling someone that it must be so embarrassing for Trevor to have a sister who couldn't even finish college. And Brianna adding that at least Trevor had turned out successful, unlike some people in his family. I was about to leave, to just walk out and never subject myself to this again, when Trevor appeared at my side. "Hey, I'm really glad you came," he said quietly. "I know this is probably hard with mom and dad here." I forced a smile. "It's fine. I'm happy for you, Trevor. Vanessa seems very confident." He laughed nervously. "Yeah, she's definitely confident. Her and her friends, they're all really driven at work. They're always talking about climbing the corporate ladder and making names for themselves." Something clicked in my mind. "Where did you say Vanessa works?" Trevor looked surprised I didn't remember. "Hartley Digital Solutions. She's in client relations. Madison is in marketing. Brianna is in HR. And Chelsea does graphic design. They all work there together. Been there for about 2 years. Vanessa says it's the best company she's ever worked for. Great benefits and the pay is amazing." My heart started pounding. Hartley Digital Solutions. My company. Vanessa and her 3 cruel friends worked at my company. I was their boss. I owned the place. They had absolutely no idea who I was because I didn't work in the office every day. I split my time between remote work and meetings with major clients. The day-to-day operations were handled by my management team, and I'd intentionally kept a low profile with regular employees because I didn't want special treatment or awkwardness. The management team knew who I was, obviously, but I'd asked them to keep my ownership private from most staff to avoid creating a weird dynamic. I'd hired the management team to handle HR, marketing, and client relations specifically, so I could focus on the technical and strategic aspects of the business. I reviewed their hiring decisions, but I didn't meet most new employees personally unless they were in senior positions. Vanessa and her friends had been hired during a period when we were rapidly expanding, bringing on 20 new people in 6 months. I'd approved their hires based on resumes and interview reports, but had never met them face to face, and they'd never bothered to learn who actually owned the company. Apparently, I excused myself from Trevor and found a quiet corner, pulling out my phone. I opened the company's HR database, accessed through a secure app, and searched for their names. There they were: Vanessa Porter, Client Relations Specialist, hired 23 months ago; Madison Wells, Marketing Coordinator; Brianna Torres, HR Associate; Chelsea Kim, Graphic Designer, all hired within the same 3-month period. all earning respectable salaries, all with decent but not exceptional performance reviews. I sat back and a slow smile spread across my face. This changed everything. These women had spent the entire evening mocking me, calling me a dropout and unemployed and a loser, treating me like I was beneath them. They'd done it in front of my family, reinforcing every negative thing my parents had ever said about me. And on Monday morning, they were going to walk into work and discover that the woman they'd been ridiculing owned the entire company, that I signed their paychecks, that their careers were completely in my hands. I wasn't a vindictive person by nature. I'd built my success through hard work and merit, not by tearing other people down. But these women had been unnecessarily cruel, and they'd done it at an event that was already difficult for me. They'd mocked my appearance, my career, my choices, without knowing anything real about me. They'd made assumptions based on gossip and had decided I was worth less than them. Well, they were about to learn a very valuable lesson about assumptions. I spent the rest of the party observing them. They were loud and obnoxious, drinking too much, making jokes at other people's expense. They cornered my mother at one point, and I watched as they bonded over how difficult it must be for Trevor to have a sister who hadn't lived up to the family's standards. My mother ate it up, agreeing enthusiastically, sharing stories about my wasted potential and my stubborn refusal to listen to good advice. Vanessa assured her that Trevor would never let me be a burden on him, that Vanessa would make sure they maintained appropriate boundaries with problematic family members. At one point, Chelsea approached me at the bar. She was clearly drunk, swaying slightly as she leaned against the counter next to me. "You know what your problem is?" she slurred. "You don't have ambition. You gave up on college because it was too hard. And now you're stuck in a dead-end job because you don't have the drive to do anything better. Some people are just meant to be mediocre, and that's okay. You just have to accept it." I looked at her, this young woman who'd worked at my company for less than 2 years and thought she understood life and success. "That's an interesting perspective," I said calmly. "Do you have a lot of experience with mediocrity?" She blinked, not quite drunk enough to miss that I might be insulting her back. "I have experience with success," she said defensively. "I work at one of the best companies in the industry. I'm going places." "I'm sure you are," I said. "What's the name of your company again?" She puffed up with pride. "Hartley Digital Solutions. Maybe you've heard of it. We're a major player in digital marketing and software development. I do all their graphic design for major corporate clients." "Impressive," I said. "Do you know who owns the company?" She frowned, thinking, "Some guy, I think, or maybe a corporation. I don't know. Why would I care about that? I just do my job and collect my paycheck, right?" I said. "Why would you care about details like who signs your paycheck?" She missed the sarcasm entirely. "Exactly. As long as the money hits my account, I don't care who's in charge." I smiled and excused myself, leaving her at the bar to order another drink she didn't need. The party wound down around 11. Trevor and Vanessa made speeches thanking everyone for coming, talking about their love story and their future together. Vanessa made a point of thanking her parents and Trevor's parents for raising such wonderful children. She didn't mention me once, which was fine. I hadn't expected to be included in the perfect family narrative. As people started leaving, Trevor found me again. "Thanks for staying the whole time," he said. "I know it couldn't have been easy with Mom and Dad being, Mom and Dad, it was fine." I lied. "Vanessa seems very happy," he grinned. "She is. And her friends love her so much. They've been so supportive of our relationship. It's nice to know I'm marrying someone with such a good support system." I thought about telling him right then what I'd discovered, that his fiancée and her friends had spent the evening mocking his sister, that they worked at my company, that they had no idea they'd been insulting their boss. But I decided to wait. This conversation needed to happen at work, in a professional setting, where there would be consequences and witnesses. "When's the wedding?" I asked instead. 6 months. Next spring. I hope you'll be there." "We'll see," I said noncommittally. I left the party and drove home to my apartment, a spacious 2-bedroom in a nice building downtown with a view of the mountains. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on my balcony, looking out at the Denver lights and thinking about Monday. I had 2 days to decide exactly how I wanted to handle this situation. I could be petty and vengeful, fire them all on the spot for their behavior, but that would make me look bad and would hurt Trevor. I could confront them privately, let them know who I was, and watch them squirm. But that felt too easy to private. They'd humiliated me publicly, so I wanted them to understand their mistake in a way they'd never forget. By Sunday evening, I had a plan. Monday morning, I arrived at the Hartley Digital Solutions office at 8 a.m. Earlier than usual, the office was a modern space in downtown Denver, open plan with natural light and all the tech company amenities. Standing desks, a game room, a kitchen stocked with free snacks and drinks. I'd designed it to be a place where people would want to work, where they'd feel valued and comfortable. I'd put a lot of thought and money into creating a good work environment. I went straight to my office, a corner suite that I used for in-person meetings and strategic planning. My chief operations officer, James Mitchell, was already there waiting for me. James was 50, experienced, and had been George Chen's right-hand man before becoming mine. He was one of the few people who knew the full story of my family situation and my rise to ownership. "Morning, Sophia," he said. "You said you needed to talk about something urgent." I filled him in on what had happened at the engagement party, watching his face cycle through surprise, anger, and then a grim satisfaction. "So what do you want to do?" he asked. "Fire them?" "Because we'd have grounds, creating a hostile work environment toward the company owner. Even if they didn't know who you were." I shook my head. "I don't want to fire them yet. I want to give them a chance to understand what they did. I'm calling an all-staff meeting for 9 a.m. Every employee in the building. I'm going to introduce myself properly to the company, explain my background and my vision for where we're going. And those 4 women are going to realize exactly who they were mocking on Saturday night." James grinned. "That's going to be quite a moment." We spent the next hour preparing. James sent out a company-wide memo announcing a mandatory all-staff meeting at 9, noting that the owner would be present and making important announcements about the company's future. At 8:45, employees started gathering in the large conference room we used for company meetings. I watched through the glass walls as they filed in, chatting casually, curious about what this meeting might be about. There were about 50 people now, including some remote workers who dialed in via video conference. At 8, Vanessa, Madison, Brianna, and Chelsea arrived together, carrying coffee cups from the expensive cafe downstairs. They were laughing about something, completely relaxed and unconcerned. They had no idea what was coming. They found seats near the middle of the room, still chatting, barely paying attention as other employees settled in. At exactly 9 a.m., James walked to the front of the room and called for everyone's attention. "Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for being here. Today we have something special. Our owner and CEO is here to address the company, to share her vision for where Hartley Digital Solutions is headed, and to personally thank you all for your hard work and dedication." I could see confusion on many faces. Her vision. Many of the employees assumed Hartley Digital Solutions was owned by a man, either because of the gender-neutral last name or because they'd never bothered to find out. I stood up from where I'd been sitting in the back corner, straightened my blazer, and walked to the front of the room. The conference room went very quiet as people tried to place me. Some of the longer-term employees recognized me, nodding with knowing smiles. But most of the newer staff looked confused. And then I made eye contact with Vanessa. I watched as recognition dawned on her face. Her eyes went wide, her mouth opened slightly, her face drained of color. She grabbed Madison's arm and whispered something. Madison looked up at me and went equally pale. Within seconds, all 4 women looked like they'd seen a ghost. They were frozen in their seats, trapped in the middle of the room with dozens of colleagues around them, unable to run or hide or pretend this wasn't happening. "Good morning," I said, my voice carrying easily through the room. "For those of you who don't know me yet, my name is Sophia Hartley. I am the owner and CEO of Hartley Digital Solutions. I inherited this company from my mentor, George Chen, who founded it as Apex Solutions over 30 years ago. I've been with this company for 8 years, working my way up from tech support to CTO before George entrusted me with ownership when he passed away 2 years ago." I paused, letting that sink in. "I want to start by saying that I'm incredibly proud of what we've built here. This company provides excellent service to our clients, and that's because of your talent and dedication. I don't often work from the office because I prefer to let our management team handle day-to-day operations while I focus on growth strategy and major client relationships. But that doesn't mean I'm not paying attention to what happens here, to how we treat each other, to the culture we're creating." I could see people shifting uncomfortably, wondering where this was going. Vanessa looked like she might be sick. I come from a background that some might consider disadvantaged. I paid my own way through college while working multiple jobs. I had to take a leave of absence at one point due to illness and financial hardship. I completed my degree part-time while working full-time here, taking 8 years to finish instead of 4. Some people might look at that path and see failure. They might say I dropped out, that I couldn't hack it, that I took the easy way out. Now people were really uncomfortable, looking at each other with questions in their eyes. But I see something different when I look at my path. I see determination. I see resilience. I see someone who refused to give up on her dreams even when the odds were stacked against her. And I built this company on those same principles. We hire people who work hard, who innovate, who treat others with respect, and who understand that success comes in many forms. I looked directly at Vanessa now, holding her gaze. This weekend, I attended my brother's engagement party. Trevor is marrying a woman who works here at Hartley Digital Solutions. Several of her friends, who also work here, were at that party, and I witnessed some behavior that troubled me deeply. The room was silent now. Everyone knew something big was happening. Vanessa's hands were shaking. These individuals, without knowing anything about me beyond gossip and assumptions, spent the evening mocking my appearance, my education, my career path. They called me a dropout, implied I was unemployed or underemployed, suggested I was an embarrassment to my family. They did this loudly, in front of many people, without any consideration for how their words might affect someone. I walked slowly along the front of the room, my heels clicking on the floor. Now, they didn't know they were insulting their employer. They had no idea that the unemployed loser they were ridiculing was the person who signs their paychecks, who approves their benefits, who decides their future at this company. And that's almost worse, in a way, because it means they felt comfortable being casually cruel to someone they saw as beneath them, someone who couldn't fight back or affect their lives in any way. Madison had tears running down her face now. Chelsea was staring at her lap. Brianna's face was red with humiliation, but Vanessa was looking at me with a mixture of terror and defensive anger, like she wanted to argue but knew she couldn't. So this morning, I want to make something very clear to everyone in this room. At Hartley Digital Solutions, we do not tolerate cruelty. We do not tolerate mockery of anyone's background, education, or life circumstances. We do not make assumptions about people's worth based on their resume or their appearance or their family connections. We treat every person with basic human dignity, whether they're the CEO or the janitor, because that's what decent people do. I stopped walking and faced the room fully. The 4 individuals I'm referring to know who they are. They're sitting here right now feeling embarrassed and scared and good. They should feel that way. They should understand that their actions have consequences. I paused, letting the tension build. However, I'm not going to fire them today. I believe in second chances. I believe people can learn from their mistakes. So here's what's going to happen. I counted on my fingers. First, Vanessa Porter, Madison Wells, Brianna Torres, and Chelsea Kim will each write a formal letter of apology, not to me, but to themselves, examining why they felt it was acceptable to mock another human being and what they can do to be better people going forward. These letters will be submitted to HR by end of business Wednesday. Second, they will each complete our company's professional conduct training program again, even though they've already done it, because clearly it didn't stick the first time. Third, they will be placed on 90-day performance improvement plans, not because their work performance has been poor, but because their behavior does not reflect our company values. During those 90 days, they will be evaluated not just on their work output, but on how they treat their colleagues, how they contribute to our culture, and whether they can demonstrate genuine growth and change. Fourth, any repetition of this behavior, any instance of cruelty or mockery or disrespect toward anyone at this company or in their personal lives that reflects back on this organization, will result in immediate termination. There will be no third chances. These 4 employees are getting more grace than they showed me, and I expect them to appreciate that and rise to the challenge of becoming better versions of themselves. The room was absolutely silent. You could hear the ventilation system humming. Now, for everyone else in this room, let this be a lesson. You never know who you're talking to. You never know what someone has been through, what they've overcome, what they're capable of. The person you dismiss as unimportant might be the person who determines your future. The person you mock for their struggles might be the person you need help from someday. Treat people with kindness and respect always. Not because of what they can do for you, but because it's the right way to live.